Hello. Welcome back to Boring History for Sleep. Find your comfortable position now. Take a slow, deep breath and let it go with a long, soft sigh. Allow your body to feel heavy. S-U-P-P-O-R-T-E-D, sinking gently into the surface beneath you. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Release the small muscles around your eyes. Unclench your jaw. Let go of the heat of the day, the hurried pace, the sharp edges of your thoughts. Allow it all to soften. Imagine a stillness, a waiting, a world holding its breath, and then a gentle release, a cooling, a sense of relief. That is where we are going tonight. Our journey takes us to the Indian subcontinent during the age of the great Mughal Empire. But we will not be in the glittering courts. We are going to the countryside, to the rich, fertile land, to understand the life of those who fed an empire, and whose lives were ruled by a force far greater than any emperor, the Monsoon. So, let your own breath be like a slow, steady rain, gentle, rhythmic, and allow your mind to drift with me now into the humid, fragrant air of a monsoon past. Our story begins not with rain, but with its absence. It begins in the oppressive, suffocating heat that comes just before the relief. We are in a small village in the vast Gangetic plain. Sometime in the 17th century, the sun is a merciless, white disk in a dusty, pale sky. The earth is the color of baked clay, cracked and fissured like an old piece of pottery. The air itself feels heavy, thick with dust you can taste. Nothing moves quickly. The water buffalo, their ribs showing through their hides, stand listlessly in the shade of a sparse banyan tree. The village dogs pant in shallow trenches they've dug in the cool earth beneath the huts. You might imagine the feel of this heat. It is not a gentle warmth. It is a physical weight, a presence that drains the will and slows the blood. The world seems to be holding its breath, caught in a state of suspended animation. The village is a collection of simple structures. The huts are made of mud and clay, mixed with straw, their walls thick and solid. The roofs are thatched with heavy layers of grass and palm leaves, now dried to a brittle brown. A small, open courtyard, swept clean of dust, sits at the front of each home. This is where much of life happens. In the cooler hours of the early morning and late evening, inside a hut, the air is cooler, but thick with the smells of clay, of smoke from past cooking fires, and of dry reeds. It is dark. The only light comes from the low doorway. The floor is packed earth, worn smooth by generations of bare feet. There is very little furniture, a few clay pots for water and grain, a sleeping mat woven from reeds, a small grinding stone. Life here is stripped down to its essence. Our farmer rises before the sun, in the grey pre-dawn light. His name is lost to time, for he was one of millions. He is a man made of sinew and patience. His skin the color of the earth. He works, his face lined by the sun and by worry. His first task is to check on his 2 bullocks. They are his most prized possessions. His partners in labor, he murmurs to them softly, his voice a low rumble, as he gives them their meager portion of dried fodder. His wife is already awake, her movements economical and quiet in the small space. She is at the grinding stone, the chaki, her body rocking in a steady, ancient rhythm as she grinds the day's portion of millet or barley into coarse flour. The sound is a soft, gritty whisper, one of the first sounds of the village waking up. The morning meal is simple. A flat, unleavened bread, a roti, cooked on a clay griddle over a small fire of dried cow dung. There might be a small bowl of thin lentil soup, a dal, or a lump of coarse brown sugar, gur, for energy. It is eaten quickly, quietly. Every grain is precious. Then, the farmer walks to his field. It is a small patch of land, perhaps an acre or two, delineated by low mud banks. The ground is hard, unyielding. He has ploughed it after the last harvest with his simple wooden plough and hell tipped with a small iron point. Now he can do nothing but wait. His eyes, like the eyes of every farmer in the village, scan the horizon. They look to the south, to the west, waiting for a sign. The days pass in this state of anxious stillness. The heat builds. The dust devils dance across the parched fields. The worry in the village becomes a palpable thing. Will the rains come on time? Will they be enough, or will they be too much? The fate of the entire year, the difference between sustenance and starvation, hangs on this single cosmic uncertainty. And then, one afternoon, something changes. A different kind of breeze begins to stir. It carries not dust, but a strange, damp, earthy smell. The sky to the south, once pale and hazy, is now bruised with a deep, leaden grey. A low, distant rumble, more felt in the chest than heard with the ears, vibrates through the ground. A quiet excitement ripples through the village. People emerge from their huts, their faces turned to the sky. The air grows cooler, charged with energy. The first drop of rain is an event. It is not small and gentle. It is a single, fat, heavy drop that lands on the dusty ground with a small puff, then another, and then the sky opens. The rain that comes is not a drizzle. It is it falls in thick, solid sheets, a deafening, drumming roar on the thatched roofs, on the baked earth, on the dusty leaves of the trees. The sound is immense, overwhelming, washing away the silence of the past few weeks. Within minutes, the dust is gone. The air is filled with the most wonderful smell imaginable, the smell of petrichor, the scent of rain hitting dry, thirsty earth. It is the smell of life, of relief, of a promise fulfilled. Children run out into the downpour, laughing and shouting, letting the cool water wash over them. But the relief soon gives way to a new reality. The rain does not stop. It continues for hours, for days. The drumming on the roof becomes the constant soundtrack of existence. The parched fields turn from brown to a deep, dark mud. The village paths dissolve into thick, slippery sludge that pulls at the ankles with every step. The farmer's work begins now, and it is brutal. He takes his bullocks out into the flooded field. The simple wooden plough is heavy, and the animals strain, sinking fetlock deep in the thick, wet soil. The farmer guides them, his feet also sinking, the mud clinging to him. It is slow, back-breaking work, turning over the sodden earth to prepare it for the rice seedlings. His wife, meanwhile, is tending to the nursery patch, a small, carefully prepared bed where the rice seeds were sown to sprout. Now, she and the other women of the village spend their days bent over in the rain, their backs aching, carefully pulling up the tender green seedlings, bundling them, and carrying them to the newly ploughed fields. Planting the rice is an art. Standing in calf-deep, murky water under the incessant rain, they push the individual seedlings into the mud, one by one, in neat, evenly spaced rows. Their fingers are wrinkled from the constant immersion in water. Their clothes are perpetually damp. The world shrinks. The horizon disappears behind a grey curtain of rain. Life becomes confined to the hut and the adjacent fields. The vibrant green that emerges is almost shocking. It is a luminous, almost fluorescent green, the colour of new life, a stark contrast to the grey sky and the brown water. Inside the hut, the atmosphere changes. The air is heavy with humidity. A thin film of moisture seems to coat every surface. The smell of damp earth and mildew is ever present. Clothes refuse to dry, hanging limply in the humid air. The thatched roof, which seemed so solid, begins to weep. A slow, steady drip in the corner of the hut becomes a familiar sound. Another layer in the symphony of the rain. A small clay pot is placed to catch the water. Drip, dot, 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 drip. A tiny, persistent reminder of the saturation. The diet changes too. Fresh greens, foraged from the edges of the fields, become available. The chorus of frogs at night is deafening, and they become a welcome addition to the cooking pot. But the monsoon is a fickle master. It brings life, but it also brings peril. The river, once a sleepy, shallow stream, is now a raging brown torrent, carrying debris and threatening to break its banks. A week of unbroken, heavy rain can mean the difference between a perfect crop and a flooded, ruined one. The constant dampness brings sickness. Fevers, coughs, and ailments of the stomach become common in the village. The local healer is busy, dispensing herbal remedies. There is a quiet sense of foreboding that lives alongside the relief. The farmer's life is now ruled by this rhythm of the rain, waking in the damp, grey light to the sound of drumming on the roof, the squelch of his feet in the mud as he walks to his fields, hours spent wading in the water, tending to the precious, vulnerable rice plants, returning at dusk, soaked and weary, to the small, smoky hut, the evening meal eaten as the rain continues its endless tattoo. This is the life he was born into. It is a life of profound connection to the natural world, a life of patience and deep ancestral knowledge, but it is also a life of relentless, wearing hardship, a life where you are never truly dry, never truly warm, always at the mercy of the grey, weeping sky. It is a life you might, after weeks of unbroken rain, come to quietly, deeply loathe. The farmer in his field, back bent against the rain, was the foundation of the world. His struggle in the mud, his patient tending of the rice seedlings, did more than feed his own family. That single, tiny plot of land, multiplied by millions, was the engine that powered the entire glittering Mughal Empire. The grain he produced was not just food, it was revenue. It was the wealth that paid for armies, that built magnificent tombs, and that kept the intricate machinery of the state in motion. And for much of its history, that machinery was inefficient, unpredictable, and often cruel. The connection between the farmer and the emperor's treasury was a chain of many grasping hands. Local landlords, the zamindars, and petty officials could demand as much as they dared, their greed a greater threat than any flood. In a good year, they might take half the crop. In a bad year, they might take even more, leaving the farmer with nothing but debt. There was no certainty, no predictability. Life was a gamble not only against the sky, but against the whims of the powerful men just a few miles away. This was the world that a young, ambitious, and unusually curious emperor inherited. This was the challenge faced by Jalaluddin Muhammad, known to history as Akbar. Was a man of immense energy and boundless intellect, but his story, in this context, is not one of great battles or conquests. It is the story of a quieter, but far more revolutionary campaign. A campaign to understand, to measure, and to bring a rational order to the vast, chaotic world of his empire. He sought to replace the arbitrary power of local lords with the predictable, mathematical authority of the central state. He could not do this alone. The architect of this quiet revolution was a man named Raja Todar Mal, a brilliant administrator and finance minister. Todar Mal was not a swashbuckling courtier. You might imagine him as a man of quiet intensity. His world defined not by silks and jewels, but by ledgers, maps, and a big He was a man who believed that the world could be understood through numbers. He saw the empire not as a collection of people, but as a vast grid of agricultural plots, each with a measurable potential. Together, Akbar and Todar Mal embarked on a project of breathtaking ambition. It was a project that would take more than a decade to complete. They set out to measure the entire agricultural land of the empire. This was not a war fought with cannons and cavalry, but a quiet war fought with bamboo rods and iron rings. For centuries, land had been measured with flimsy hemp ropes. These ropes had a notorious flaw. They would shrink on a dry day and stretch on a humid one. A clever official could easily manipulate the measurement, cheating the farmer or the state as it suited him. Todar Mal's first innovation was simple, yet profound. He introduced a new measuring device. It was a long rod of bamboo, joined together with iron rings. It was a standardized, unchangeable unit of length. It was an instrument of truth. Now, picture the teams of surveyors, the army, fanning out across the countryside. They are not fearsome soldiers. They are quiet, methodical clerks and engineers. They move through the villages, through the fields. Their work slow and deliberate. They carry the long, clinking tannab rods. They carry notebooks made of paper or dried palm leaves and pots of ink. Their work follows the rhythm of the seasons. They must wait for the rain to subside, for the fields to be accessible. Then they begin. Two men hold the tannab rod, laying it end to end, carefully measuring the exact dimensions of every single plot of land. They measure the farmer's small field, the one we imagined earlier. They record its precise size in their ledgers, down to the tiniest fraction of a unit. But measurement was only the first step. The true genius of the system was in the data they collected. For each region, for each type of land, they were tasked with assessing its quality. They did not simply declare it good or bad. They created specific classifications. There was Poli land, which was ideally cultivated every year. There was Parauti land, which had to be left fallow for a year or two to recover its fertility. There was Shakar land that had been fallow for 3 or 4 years. And Banya, the worst kind, which had been uncultivated for 5 years or more. For a period of 10 years, from 1570 to 1580, these quiet officials recorded everything. In each district, they noted which crops were grown: rice, wheat, barley, millet, sugarcane, cotton, indigo. They then meticulously recorded the average yield for each crop on each class of land. How much rice did an acre of Poli land produce in a good year? How much millet did an acre of Parauti land yield? And they went further still. They recorded the prices. They visited local markets and noted the average price of each commodity over that same 10-year period. What was the going rate for a mond of wheat in the market town of Kap? How much did cotton sell for in the region of Bang? This was a project of immense, almost unimaginable scale, an empire-wide census of the land's productive capacity. It was a slow, patient accumulation of facts. The reports would make their way by runner or by cart from the distant provinces to the administrative centers, and finally to the capital, Agra. There, in quiet, shaded courtyards, an army of clerks, overseen by Todar Mal himself, would collate the data. The rustle of paper, the soft scratching of pens, the low murmur of men reading numbers aloud. This was the sound of a new kind of power being forged. After a decade of this painstaking work, the system was ready. It was called the Dasala system. From the Persian word for 10 years, the solution it offered was one of elegant, mathematical simplicity. For any given plot of land, the state now had 10 years of data on its average produce and 10 years of data on the average price of that produce. They could now calculate the average value of the crop from that specific field over the past decade. The state's share was then fixed, typically at 1/3 of this average value, And here was the crucial change. This tax was fixed not in grain, but in cash, and it was fixed for the next 10 years. Think of what this meant for our farmer. Suddenly, the terrible uncertainty was gone. He knew, with absolute clarity, how much tax he owed this year and next year, and for a decade to come. It did not matter if he had a spectacular harvest. His tax would not go up. The grasping hand of the local zemindar was restrained. The state now dealt with him directly, based on a clear, transparent, and predictable calculation. He could plan, he could, perhaps for the first time, dare to save a little, to invest in a better tool, or to repair his hut. It was not a perfect system in years of drought or flood. Paying a fixed cash rate could be a terrible burden, but it was a world away from the arbitrary chaos that had come before. For the empire, the Dasala system was a revolution. It provided a stable, predictable, an enormous stream of revenue that became the bedrock of Mughal power for a century. It allowed Akbar and his successors to fund their vast armies, their sprawling bureaucracy, and the architectural wonders that still leave us breathless today. The ethereal beauty of the Taj Mahal is, in a very real sense, built upon the mathematical precision of Todar Mal's land survey. It was a quiet revolution of measurement and reason, an attempt to impose a human, rational order upon the organic, unpredictable rhythms of the land and its life-giving, life-taking monsoon. Akbar and Todar Mal could not control the rain, but they tried, with remarkable success, to control its economic consequences, changing the very relationship between the ruler and the ruled, one measured field at a time. The great Emperor Akbar and his minister Todar Mal could measure the land, they could count its yield, calculate its value, and create a system of elegant, rational order. Their ledgers and their bamboo rods could tame the economy of the empire, but they could not tame the sky. They could not command a single cloud, nor hasten the arrival of the rain by a single day. For the farmer, whose life depended not on ledgers but on the living earth, this truth was the most profound of all. When faced with a power so immense, so absolute, and so unpredictable as the monsoon, mathematics and reason offer little comfort, and so humanity has always turned to something older and deeper. It turns to myth, to ritual, and to belief. It seeks not to control the storm, but to understand it, to appease it, to find a human meaning in its fury and its grace. In the world of the Mughal farmer, the monsoon was never just a meteorological event. It was a drama. The sky was a stage, and the clouds, the thunder, and the rain were the divine actors. You might imagine the farmer looking up at the gathering clouds. He does not see water, vapor, and air pressure. He sees the great celestial elephants of the god Indra. Their grey hides dark with water, moving slowly across the heavens. The deep rumble of thunder is the sound of their approach. Lightning is the flash of Indra's divine weapon, the Vajra, a thunderbolt of irresistible force. The stories told in the village, passed down through countless generations, gave a name and a narrative to his anxieties and his hopes. The most ancient of these tales is the story of Indra's cosmic battle with the demon Vidya. The stories told that, in the time before time, a great serpent demon named Viritra, whose name means the enveloper, had coiled himself around the mountains. He had swallowed all the waters of the world, hoarding them in his vast belly. The earth grew dry and cracked. The rivers vanished, the plants withered, and all living things began to thirst. The world was dying. The gods themselves were powerless against this great drought. In their desperation, they turned to Indra, the king of the gods. Indra, filled with a divine energy, prepared for battle. He drank the sacred soma, a drink of power and inspiration, and hefted his mighty thunderbolt the Vajra forged for him by a divine craftsman. He rode his magnificent white elephant, Airavata, into the sky and confronted the demon. The battle was immense, shaking the foundations of the cosmos. But it is not a battle of simple violence, we should imagine. It is a battle of cosmic forces, of darkness against light, of stagnation against flow, of drought against rain. With a final, mighty blow, Indra struck the demon with his thunderbolt. Vratra's mountainous form was split open, and from his belly the waters of the world were released. They burst forth in a great, life-giving torrent. The rivers were born, flowing to the sea. The rain fell upon the thirsty earth. The world, which had been brown and dying, was filled once more with the sound of water and turned a vibrant, luminous green. This was not just a story. For the farmer, it was an explanation for the yearly miracle. Every year, the heat would build, the world would dry up, and it was as if Vritra had coiled himself around the land once more. And every year, the farmer would wait for Indra to come, to strike the sky with his lightning and release the life-giving waters. The monsoon was the reenactment of this cosmic victory. Other stories also colored the air. The people told tales of the great god Vishnu in his incarnation as the playful, beloved Krishna. It is said that one year Indra, in a fit of arrogance, sent a catastrophic deluge to punish the villagers of Vrindavan. But the young Krishna, with effortless grace, simply lifted the entire Govardhan hill on his little finger, holding it aloft like an umbrella for 7 days and 7 nights, sheltering all the villagers and their cattle from the storm. It was a story that spoke of a different kind of divine power, not the fury of the storm god, but the gentle, protective grace of a loving deity. Faced with such powerful forces, the villagers did not simply wait. They participated. They performed rituals to call the rain, to encourage it, to show the heavens that they were ready. Before the monsoon, you might see a small procession of women walking to the edge of the village. Carrying small clay pots, they would make offerings to the local earth goddess, the Grama Devata, a deity of that specific place. They would leave a few flowers, a little milk, a smear of vermilion powder on a sacred stone, begging the earth to be fertile, to be ready to receive the rain's embrace, and they would sing the songs of the monsoon. The Kayari songs are a genre of their own. They are filled with a deep sense of longing, of viraha or separation. The lyrics speak from the perspective of a young woman longing for her beloved who is away. But the beloved is also the rain. The clouds are dark like his skin. The lightning is the flash of his eyes. The songs are a call, a plea, a sweet and mournful invitation for the absent lover, the rain, to return. You can almost hear the slow, swaying melody sung by a group of women in the oppressive evening heat, their voices carrying across the silent, waiting fields. And when the rains finally arrived, the mood would shift from one of longing to one of celebration. This joy is captured in festivals like Ted, which takes place in the 3rd month of the Hindu calendar, right in the heart of the monsoon. It is a festival celebrated primarily by women. You might imagine the village now transformed into a world of startling green. From the thick branches of the banyan trees, long swings are hung, decorated with marigolds and jasmine flowers. Groups of girls and women, dressed in their finest clothes saris of brilliant green, yellow and red, the colors of life and fertility, take turns on the swings. They swing high into the misty, humid air, their laughter mixing with the sound of the rain, their songs celebrating the joy and relief the monsoon brings. Their hands and feet are decorated with intricate patterns of mehndi or henna. The dark, reddish-brown stain of the henna is considered auspicious, a symbol of beauty and blessing. The process itself is a slow, patient ritual. The artist carefully piping delicate patterns of vines, flowers, and peacocks onto the skin. Special foods are prepared. The most beloved is gavar, a disc-shaped sweet cake made from flour and ghee, soaked in sugar syrup. It has a unique, porous, honeycomb-like texture. It is a sweet that only appears during the monsoon. Its richness, a celebration of the season's bounty. This world of belief was not exclusively Hindu. The coming of the mules had brought Islam to the heart of India, and a new layer of meaning was added to the monsoon. For the Muslim farmer, the rain was a profound sign of Rahmah, the mercy of Allah. It was a tangible symbol of God's power to give life, to turn a dead land into a living one, as promised in the Quran. The Sufi mystics and poets, who sought a direct, personal experience of the divine, found a powerful metaphor in the monsoon. The parched earth, longing for the rain, was like the human soul, longing for union with God. The great Sufi poet Amir Khusro, who wrote in Persian and Hindavi, captured this feeling in his verses. The joy of the first rain was like the ecstatic joy of the mystic who finally feels the presence of the divine after a long period of spiritual drought. So, for the farmer, the monsoon was a complex season, experienced on many levels. It was a time of back-breaking labor in the mud. It was a time of anxiety, of worrying if the rain would be too much or too little, but it was also a time steeped in myth, in ritual, in celebration. It was a time when the world of the gods felt incredibly close, when the stories of Indra and Krishna played out in the sky above. It was a time when the songs of longing were answered, and the world was washed clean, renewed, and filled with the promise of life. It was a shared emotional and spiritual landscape, a way of giving meaning to the rain that ruled every aspect of their lives. The myths and festivals gave the monsoon a soul. The songs and rituals provided a language for the heart, a way to navigate the profound emotional landscape of hope and fear that came with the rains. But for the rulers of the land, from local chieftains to the great Mughal emperors themselves, faith and feeling were not enough. To build a stable empire, to feed a growing city, to turn an arid patch of land into a fragrant, blooming garden, one had to do more than pray for rain. One had to manage it, and so, alongside the spiritual landscape of myth, there grew another landscape, one of stone, earth, and quiet engineering. This was a world of canals, of vast reservoirs, and most remarkably, of great subterranean It was a testament to a different kind of human response to the monsoon. The patient, practical, and often beautiful attempt to tame the water. Let us first imagine the canals. The idea was simple, but the execution was monumental. The great rivers of northern India, fed by the Himalayan snows and swollen by the monsoon, carried an immense volume of water. A canal was simply a man-made river, a gentle redirection of this abundance, drawing it away from its natural course to bring life to drier lands. Emperors like Pharaohs, Shah Tughlaq, and later the great mules like Shah Jahan understood the power of these arteries of water. They ordered the digging, or the extensive repair, of canals that stretched for hundreds of miles. The work itself was a slow, human-powered affair. There were no great machines. There was only an army of laborers with simple shovels, picks, and baskets. You might imagine the scene. Thousands of men working under the dry season sun, digging the great channel. The work is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The scrape of the shovel, the thud of earth being loaded into a basket, the quiet chatter of the workers. The engineering was subtle and brilliant. The canal had to be dug at a precise, almost imperceptible gradient. Too steep, and the water would rush through, eroding the banks and failing to irrigate the land. Too shallow, and it would stagnate. The engineers, the Mirabi, or masters of the water, Use simple leveling tools and the wisdom of experience to get this gradient just right, to coax the water along its new path. Day by day, week by week, the channel would lengthen, a great earthen scar upon the landscape. And then the moment would come to open the headgates, to allow the water from the mother river to enter its new course. You can almost hear the soft, gurgling sound as the water begins to flow. It moves slowly, calmly, not with the fury of a monsoon flood, but with a gentle, steady persistence. It fills the new channel, its surface reflecting the vast, blue sky. As it flows, it transforms everything it touches. The land on its banks, once dusty and brown, begins to drink. The water seeps into the soil, and soon a thin, bright line of green appears, following the canal's path for miles and miles across the plains. This water fed the spectacular gardens of the Mughal elite, the famous Shahberg Gardens, with their geometric layouts, fountains, and pavilions, but it also fed the fields of countless farmers, allowing them to grow a second or even a third crop, freeing them from the sole tyranny of the monsoon. The canal became a source of life, its quiet, steady presence a symbol of the emperor's power and his paternal care. But in regions away from the great rivers, a different solution was needed. Here, the challenge was not to divert water, but to reach it, to follow it down into the earth as the water table fell during the long, dry months. The answer to this challenge was one of the most remarkable architectural forms of the Indian subcontinent. Or Bauli, a stepwell is more than a well. It is a piece of inverse architecture, a building that descends into the earth instead of rising into the sky. You see a wide opening in the ground, and from it, a great stone staircase begins its journey downwards. The experience of entering a stepwell is one of gradual transformation. With each step you take, the world changes. The blistering heat of the sun begins to recede. The air grows cooler, damper, and still. The loud noises of the world above fade away, replaced by a deep, resonant silence, broken only by the sound of your own footsteps on the stone and the cooing of pigeons that make their homes in the shaded archways. The architecture is designed to be both functional and beautiful. The staircase is not just a single, straight flight. It is often a complex, geometric marvel, with landings and side staircases creating intricate patterns. As you descend, you pass through levels of carved galleries and cool, shaded pavilions, their pillars holding up the weight of the earth. These were not just places to fetch water, they were subterranean community centers. You can imagine the women of the village, their clay pots balanced on their hips, gathering on these cool steps. They are sheltered from the sun, and here, in the quiet cool of the earth, they can rest, talk, and exchange the news of the day. The stepwell was a social space, a refuge primarily for women. As you go deeper, the light changes. The harsh glare of the sun is filtered through the architecture, creating a soft, ethereal glow. Carved niches in the walls might hold small, flickering lamps. The stone walls, cooled to the touch, are often decorated with intricate carvings of deities, animals, and floral patterns. Finally, at the very bottom, after a descent of perhaps 100 feet or more, you reach the water. In the dry season, it is a dark, still, circular pool, its surface reflecting the small patch of sky visible from the depths. This is the water table, the hidden reservoir that the stepwell allows you to follow. During the monsoon, the well transforms. The rains pour in, and the water level rises dramatically, submerging the lower levels of the staircase, sometimes filling the entire structure almost to the brim. The stepwell becomes a vast, underground cistern storing the monsoon's bounty. Structures like the Agrasan Ki Baoli in Delhi or the magnificent Adalai Vov in Gujarat are subterranean palaces of stone. They are monuments to a deep understanding of the land, of the community, and of the precious, elusive nature of water. In the cities, a similar principle was applied on a grander scale with the creation of enormous tanks or reservoirs known as haws. The Hosaikos in Delhi, for instance, was a vast, man-made lake, created to store rainwater and supply the needs of a large urban population. Imagine standing on the banks of such a reservoir after the first rains. The water is calm, its surface a great grey mirror reflecting the monsoon clouds. Stone guards, or steps, lead down to the water's edge, allowing people to bathe, to wash clothes, to collect water. Pavilions and tombs built around its periphery turn it into a place of leisure and contemplation. These three forms of water engineering the far-reaching canal, the deep and intimate stepwell, the vast urban reservoir tell a story of ingenuity and adaptation. They represent a quiet, centuries-long conversation between humanity and the environment. They show a profound understanding that the monsoon's gift of water was wild and ephemeral, and that to truly benefit from it, one had to build structures of patience, of skill, and of stone, creating a network of lifelines that could hold and guide the water, ensuring that its blessing would last long after the clouds had passed. The canals, stepwells, and reservoirs were triumphs of engineering. They were a practical response to the monsoon's cycle of boom and bust, a way of holding on to its precious gift of water. But this water was not just for drinking, and not just for growing the millet and rice that fed the farmer's family. This carefully managed water, combined with the fertile soil and the monsoon sun, enabled the cultivation of other, more specialized plants. These were the cash crops, the plants that produced not sustenance, but wealth. They were the source of vibrant colors and luxurious textures that were coveted across the world. The bounty of the monsoon, once processed through the patient hands of countless artisans, would become the threads of a vast commercial web, quietly connecting our farmers' village to the bustling port cities and the distant markets of Europe and Asia. Let us first consider a plant of unassuming appearance, one that held a secret of startling beauty. This was indigo, the source of a deep, rich blue dye that was sometimes called blue gold. The indigo plant itself is not dramatic. It is a shrub with small, light green leaves. It grows well in the heat and humidity of the monsoon season. The farmer would cultivate it alongside his food crops, its harvest providing the cash he needed to pay his taxes and purchase goods he could not make himself. But the magic of indigo was not in the growing, it was in the complex, alchemical process of its transformation. Imagine a specialized workshop at the edge of a village, set up by a The central features are a series of large, open-air masonry vats arranged in a stepped sequence. The process begins at the harvest. The indigo plants are cut and brought to the workshop, where they are tightly packed into the uppermost vat. The steeping tank, water, perhaps drawn from a nearby canal or reservoir, is then pumped in to cover the plants completely. And now, a period of quiet waiting begins. For 10 to 15 hours, the plants are left to ferment in the warm water. There is a gentle bubbling as the chemical compounds in the leaves begin to break down and release. The water, at first clear, slowly takes on a pale yellowish-green color. A sweet, grassy, slightly sickly smell rises from the vat. When the master dyer determines that the fermentation is complete, a plug is removed and the liquid is drained into the second, lower vat. This is the beating vat. The greenish water, now free of the plant matter, sits still. And now the second stage of the transformation begins. 2 or 3 men, their bodies bare to the waist, step into the vat. They hold long wooden paddles or bamboo poles. They begin to beat the water. They move in a slow, steady rhythm, churning the liquid, forcing air into it. This is the crucial step. The oxygen in the air reacts with the dissolved indican from the plants. As they work, a magical change occurs. The yellowish-green liquid begins to transform. Flecks of deep blue begin to appear, suspended in the water. As the men continue their rhythmic churning, the entire vat of liquid slowly darkens, from green to a murky teal, and then to a deep, intense, almost blackish blue. A thick, coppery froth forms on the surface. After several hours of this continuous labor, the beating stops. The vat is left to stand for a whole day. During this time, the insoluble indigo particles, heavy now, slowly settle at the bottom, forming a thick, blue sludge. The water at the top becomes clear again. Though stained, this clear water is carefully drained away, leaving behind the precious blue paste. This sludge is then collected, moved to a third vat where it is heated, sometimes with a small amount of lime added, to halt any further fermentation and to purify it further. After being boiled, the thick, pulpy liquid is strained through cloth filters. The water drains away, leaving behind a thick, clay-like paste of pure indigo. This paste is then pressed into wooden molds to form solid cakes. These cakes are laid out to dry slowly in shaded racks, away from the direct sun. Over several weeks, they become hard and brittle, their surface showing a coppery, metallic sheen. This was the final product. These unassuming, dark blue cakes were the blue gold. They were stable, portable, and contained a concentration of color that was a small piece could dye a vast quantity of thread or cloth. This entire process from the green plant to the blue cake was a form of practical magic, a craft learned and perfected over generations. It was a slow, wet, and smelly business, but its result was one of the most desired commodities in the world. Alongside the fields of indigo, one would see the fields of another, equally important plant, cotton. The soft, white bolls of the cotton plant, bursting open under the sun after the rains have passed, were the source of India's other great treasure. Mughal India produced some of the finest, most delicate textiles the world had ever seen. And it all began with these fluffy white fibers. Once harvested, the raw cotton was taken to the home. Here, the work was often done by the women of the household. First, the fibers had to be separated from the seeds, a tedious process done by hand or with a small, simple roller gin. Then came carding, where the cotton was combed between two wooden paddles fitted with small wire teeth, a process that cleaned the fibers and aligned them, making them ready for spinning. The spinning of the thread was a quiet, domestic art. A woman would sit with a simple drop spindle or a more advanced spinning wheel, the famous charkha. You might imagine the scene in the shaded courtyard of a small hut. The only sound is the soft, worry hum of the spinning wheel. With incredible skill, the spinner draws out the cotton fibers, her fingers twisting them into a thread of remarkable fineness and strength. The finest threads, especially for the legendary muslins of Bengal, were said to be spun only in the early morning hours, when the humidity was highest, as the moisture in the air prevented the delicate thread from snapping. Once the thread was spun, it was ready for the weaver. The weaver, usually a man, worked at a large wooden handloom, set up in a shaded veranda or a special workshop. The rhythmic clacking of the loom is one of the most hypnotic and peaceful sounds of craft. Clack thump, clack thump. The weaver's feet work the treadles, raising and lowering the warp threads, while his hands deftly shoot the shuttle, carrying the weft thread from one side to the other. It was slow, intricate work. A weaver producing a simple, plain cloth might complete several yards in a day, but for the more complex patterns, for the brocades with gold and silver thread, or the gossamer fine muslins, progress would be measured in inches. Fabrics like the Dhaka muslin were the stuff of legend. They were given poetic names like Baftar, Aberavan and Shobnam. It was said that a whole turban cloth of the finest muslin could be passed through a small finger ring. These were not just textiles, they were works of art, the pinnacle of a craft that was perfectly in tune with its environment. The final products of these village industries, the hard cakes of indigo and the fine bales of cotton cloth, began a new, slow journey. During the dry season, when the roads were passable, they would be loaded onto bullock carts. The slow, creaking progress of the cart, its wooden wheels turning, was the first step in connecting the village to the world. The goods would travel to a larger river town, where they were loaded onto broad, shallow drafted boats. These barges would then begin a lazy, meandering journey down the great rivers. Like the Ganges or the Indus, the journey was measured in weeks, the boatmen poling or sailing with the current, stopping at towns along the way. Eventually, these goods would arrive at the great coastal port cities, like Surat on the west coast or Hooghly in the east. Here, the quiet, rural world gave way to a bustling, cosmopolitan one. In the warehouses of these cities, the indigo cakes and cotton bales would be bought by merchants from across the sea, Persians, Armenians, and increasingly the new traders from Europe, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the English, the farmer who grew the indigo, the dyer who beat the vats, the woman who spun the thread, and the weaver at his loom would likely never see the ocean or meet these foreign merchants. Yet the bounty of their monsoon-fed land, processed by their patient, skillful hands, was a vital link in the chain of global trade, clothing the world in the brilliant blue and soft white of the Indian subcontinent. The journey of the indigo cake and the bale of fine muslin was a long one. It began in the mud and humidity of a small village, passed through the patient hands of artisans, and travelled down the slow, brown rivers. It was a journey that transformed the humble bounty of the land into the currency of an empire, and its final destination was often the very heart of that empire. The imperial court, a world of almost unimaginable luxury and refinement. Here, in the magnificent palaces of Agra, Delhi, or Fatehpur Sikri, it was a season of poetry, of leisure, and of exquisite beauty. The very same sky that brought toil and anxiety to the farmer brought romance and relief to the emperor. To understand the sheer depth of the Mughal world, we must understand this contrast. We must leave the farmer in his field and step into the Monsoon palace. Let us return, for a moment, to our farmer. For him, the monsoon is a sensory immersion in struggle. The dominant sound is the relentless, deafening drumming of rain on his thatched roof, a sound punctuated by the slow, ominous drip, drip in the corner of his hut. The smell is of wet earth, of mildew, of damp clothes that will never fully dry. The feeling is of a perpetual, clinging dampness that seeps into the bones, and a thick, heavy pull of mud on his bare feet. His world is a world of labor, of aching muscles, and of a constant, log-rid worry about the survival of his precious crops. Now, let us shift our gaze. Let us travel to the emperor's palace. The emperor is not huddled in a small, dark hut. He is reclining on silken cushions in a vast, open-sided pavilion made of pure white marble. The architecture itself is designed to embrace the monsoon. Deep, overhanging eaves, or chijjas, shield the interior from the driving rain while welcoming the cool, moist breeze. Intricately carved marble screens, called jalis, break the wind and the rain into a fine, misty spray, casting complex, shifting patterns of shadow and light upon the polished floors. The sound the emperor hears is not the roar of the rain, but its music. It is the gentle, rhythmic patter on the marble domes and courtyards. It is the soft gurgle of water running through cleverly designed channels cut into the floor, a feature that cooled the air and created a soothing sound. It is the murmur of the fountains in the courtyard gardens, their splash and play undisturbed by the storm. The smell is not of mildew, but of life and perfume. The palace gardens, the famous Schauberg, are now at their most vibrant. The rain has washed the dust from every leaf, and the air is thick with the intoxicating fragrance of jasmine, of roses, of champaka flowers. The scent of wet earth from the manicured garden beds is a pleasing perfume, not a sign of encroaching damp. Inside the pavilion, the air is scented with burning incense, with rose water sprinkled on fine grass mats, creating a cool, fragrant atmosphere that is the very definition of luxury. The emperor's day is not one of labor, but of cultivated leisure. He might begin his morning by simply watching the rain, a cup of wine or spiced sherbet in his hand, his gaze resting on the sheets of water falling into the ornamental pools in his courtyard, the greens of the garden, the dark cypress, the lighter mango leaves, the emerald lorna, a feast for the eyes. Peacocks, the birds of the monsoon, strut across the wet grass, their brilliant tail feathers a startling jewel against the grey sky. He might hold his court, the Diwanakos, or hall of private audience, in one of these open pavilions. Here, surrounded by his most trusted nobles, he would conduct the business of the empire. But the pace is slower in this season. There is time for other pursuits. He might listen to poets who have composed new verses in honor of the rainy season. They would use the classic imagery, the longing of separated lovers, the beauty of the dark clouds too. Entertain their patron. He might play a game of pachisi on a life-sized board inlaid into the marble courtyard itself, using colorfully dressed slave girls as the living game pieces. Or he might engage in a quiet, intense game of chess, the carved ivory pieces moving silently across a board of inlaid mother-of-pearl. The food served in the imperial kitchen is a world away from the farmer's simple roti and dal. The monsoon was the season of the mango, and the emperor's cooks would prepare it in 100 different ways as juices, as desserts, in savory dishes. The imperial table would be laden with rich, complex korma, with fragrant pilafs, studded with nuts and dried fruit, with delicate kebabs, and with a vast array of breads baked in underground tandoor ovens. Each dish was a work of art, a balance of flavors designed to please the most refined palate on earth. This life of cultivated ease extended to the women of the court in the secluded world of the imperial harem. This was not a prison, but a vast and luxurious complex of its own, with its own gardens, courtyards, and pavilions. Here, the empress and the other royal women would experience the monsoon as a time of romance and joyful freedom from the oppressive heat. You might imagine them on great wooden swings, or julas, hung with jasmine garlands from the marble arches of their verandas, dressed in the finest, most translucent muslins, adorned with pearls and emeralds. They would swing out into the misty air, their laughter echoing in the enclosed gardens. They would have their hands and feet painted with intricate henna designs by their handmaidens. They would listen to female musicians and poets, or simply watch the rain fall, shielded from the world outside, living in a perfect, perfumed bubble of privilege. This was the great paradox of the Mughal monsoon. The same natural event created two entirely different realities. For the vast majority, for the millions of farmers like the one we first met, it was a season of profound hardship, a battle for survival that was only made bearable by the deep comforts of faith and community. For the tiny elite, at the pinnacle of the empire, it was a season of aesthetic pleasure, a time when nature's drama provided the perfect backdrop for a life of art, poetry, and ease. The wealth generated by the farmer's labor in the mud was transformed by the alchemy of the state into the silks, the marble, the perfumes, and the leisure that defined the life of the palace. Yet, in the end, they were connected. The emperor in his pavilion, watching the clouds, knew that the prosperity of his entire empire depended on the quantity and timing of the rain. And the farmer, standing in his flooded field, knew that his own survival depended on that very same rain. Both men, the richest and the poorest, looked to the same grey sky, their fates bound together by the immense, impartial, and life-giving power of the Indian monsoon. And so, the monsoon rains fall on the just and the unjust, on the rich and the poor, on the farmer's muddy field and the emperor's marble courtyard. The stories of their lives, the grand designs of emperors, and the quiet anxieties of farmers, the myths of the gods, and the patient work of the artisan, all eventually dissolve. Like sugar in water, the intricate patterns of henna fade from the skin. The vibrant colors of indigo cloth soften with time. The great stone stepwells slowly fill with earth, their purpose forgotten. What remains is the rhythm of the rain, a sound that has measured out the years for millennia, a sound of release, of life, of cleansing, and of rest. You have traveled far tonight, through the heat and the dust, into the heart of the great Indian monsoon. You have felt its oppressive humidity and its cool relief, but that journey is now complete. There are no more fields to plough, no more canals to dig. The stories have been told. Let them go now. Let them drift away like the fragrance of jasmine on the night air. Your only task now is to rest. Let your mind become as calm and as clear as a pool of water after the rain has stopped. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet, steady, and peaceful cadence. In and out, there is nothing else for you to do, nowhere else to be. Just this moment, this quiet, this comfort. Allow yourself to sink deeper now into the soft darkness, into the profound peace of sleep. Rest now, drift deep and